There's a certain strength that goes unnoticed in today's world, a kind of power that doesn't need to shout, doesn't need to chase, doesn't even need to explain itself. It's the power of doing nothing. And when you understand it, truly live it, you'll see something fascinating happen. She starts to chase you. When you stop overreaching, stop proving, stop trying to control what isn't yours to control, you don't lose her attention. You deepen your own. You become centered, intentional, still. And in that stillness, something unexpected happens. She notices. The pull reverses. Curiosity grows. And now, you're no longer chasing, you're being chased. So, in this video, we're going to break it all down. Why silence, space, and emotional restraint work. Why the man who does less deliberately ends up being the one she can't stop thinking about. If you've ever wondered what happens when you stop chasing, stay tuned. You're about to find out. Number 1. The Paradox of Stillness. Sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. When you stop chasing, you shift the dynamic. Like a Stoic, you step back not out of laziness, but out of mastery. And in that calm stillness, she begins to feel the imbalance. At first, she may tell herself nothing's changed, that your silence means indifference. But over time, the absence of movement becomes louder than any action. She starts to sense something she didn't before. The emotional current has reversed. Because in your stillness, there's no desperation, no validation seeking only presence. The kind of presence that doesn't need attention to be felt. That's what Stoicism teaches us. Control is not about domination, it's about restraint. When you choose stillness, you're not stuck, you're centered. And people can feel that. She feels that. You're not reacting. You're not trying to win her back. You're just grounded. Imagine being in a room full of noise, and suddenly, someone walks in who's not trying to impress anyone, he just is. That kind of presence makes an impact. And that's you. Now you've become the contrast. Stillness doesn't mean you're waiting. It means you're no longer lost in the chaos. You're building. You're growing. You're observing. While she wonders why you're not reaching out, you're discovering that you don't need to. And that realization hits differently, not just for her, but for you too. The paradox is that by doing nothing, you're actually doing everything. You're shifting the emotional balance without lifting a finger. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul." And in this stillness, in this quiet return to yourself, you gain something far more valuable than her attention. You gain your own. And ironically, that's often when her attention returns on its own. If that message resonated with you, even just a little, take a moment to reflect. Stillness is often misunderstood as weakness, but in reality, it's the birthplace of strength. It's where you reclaim your energy, your clarity, your control. And now, I'd love to hear from you. What does stillness mean to you in this stage of your journey? Share your thoughts in the comments or just leave this simple sentence to let me know you're walking the path. Stillness is my strength. Let's move on to the next insight. Number 2. Energy speaks louder than effort. You're not texting, not calling, yet your energy remains present. That quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't beg or prove, draws more attention than words ever could. As Epictetus taught, control your inner state, and the external will follow. And here's the thing. People feel energy before they even understand it. You don't have to chase, explain, or overextend. Because when you've done the inner work, when you've centered yourself, you naturally give off a different frequency. She senses it in the way you stopped reacting, in how you no longer rush to respond, no longer try to win her back, no longer make her the center of your emotional weather. That absence of effort isn't laziness, it's evolution. Think about a time you walked into a room and just felt someone's presence without them saying a word. That's energy. That's alignment. And it speaks louder than any forced attempt to get noticed. You could send 10 texts trying to win her back and still be ignored. But when you pull back with poise and live in your purpose, suddenly she feels that shift and wonders why the air feels different without you. A Stoic man doesn't waste motion. His restraint is not weakness, but wisdom. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have." So instead of chasing validation, you focused on your direction, your discipline, your peace. And ironically, that creates gravity. You don't have to push, you just exist with presence, and people can't help but notice. So, if you're wondering why your silence is louder now than your effort ever was, it's because energy grounded, calm, unapologetic energy is magnetic. Let her feel that. Let her question it. Let your growth echo in the space where your old habits used to chase. Number 3. The reverse pull effect. By doing less, you do more. Your silence creates space, and space creates desire. She starts leaning in to fill the emotional gap. It's not manipulation. It's what happens when you're centered and no longer emotionally reactive. Let's break this down for a moment. When you stop chasing, something interesting happens not just to her, but to you. You begin shifting your energy inward. You're no longer glued to the outcome, no longer restless for a reply or desperate for validation. Instead, you start to embody what the Stoics taught: self-command. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That strength, the quiet kind, has a gravitational pull of its own. And here's the beauty of the reverse pull effect. The less you try to convince her of your worth, the more she starts to feel it. Why? Because you've become scarce, but not in a bitter, withdrawn way. You're just no longer emotionally available in the same way. You're present in your life, focused, composed. And when a woman feels that shift, it triggers something deep: curiosity, confusion, reflection. Suddenly, the certainty she once had about you is replaced with questions. Why is he so calm? Why isn't he trying anymore? Has he really moved on? That's the pull, not from action, but from absence, not from noise, but from stillness. Think about it. When someone stops trying to win you over, doesn't that make you wonder why? That mystery creates a psychological vacuum, one she feels compelled to close. She texts first. She lingers on your profile. She replays old conversations, all because you chose the high road of emotional discipline rather than the low road of emotional chaos. So remember, the reverse pull effect isn't about pretending not to care. It's about actually becoming indifferent to outcomes, because your self-worth no longer hinges on how someone else responds. That's Stoicism in motion. And ironically, it's in that nonchalance, that stillness, that you become magnetic. Number 4. Mystery reawakens curiosity. When you're not always available, you become unpredictable. And that unpredictability makes her wonder, what's he doing? Like a true Stoic, you let go of the need to explain or prove yourself. And in doing so, you become fascinating again. You see, people lose interest in what's predictable. When she knows your every move, when your attention is guaranteed, the mind disengages. But the moment you become more selective, more grounded in your own rhythm, something changes. She starts checking more often, wondering more deeply, not because you're playing a game, but because you've reclaimed your energy. You've stepped back not with bitterness, but with intention. Think about a man who used to message her every morning, always replying within minutes, always reacting. Then one day, he doesn't, not out of pettiness, but because he's genuinely more invested in his purpose, the gym, his career, his peace of mind. Now, when she wakes up, there's a gap where his message used to be. That space, that's where curiosity is reborn. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." And that's exactly what you're doing. You're not explaining your silence. You're not posting to be seen. You're simply living. And that quiet confidence, that absence of neediness, is louder than any words you could say. When mystery returns, so does her attention, not because you're being distant, but because you're no longer broadcasting. And in a world where everyone's shouting for validation, your stillness stands out. It makes her think. It makes her feel. And that, my friend, is when you become unforgettable, not because you're in her face, but because you've mastered the art of leaving just enough unsaid. And that's the beauty of it. When you stop trying to be noticed, you start becoming unforgettable. Now, I want you to take a moment and reflect. Where in your life are you oversharing, over-explaining, or overextending? What might happen if you simply pulled back, even just a little, and let your presence speak for itself? The truth is, mystery isn't manipulation, it's maturity. It's the quiet strength of a man who doesn't need to chase, because he knows who he is. If this message hit home, drop your thoughts below, or just leave this in the comments. Mystery reveals more than noise ever could. Let's keep the conversation going. Number 5. Her imagination becomes your voice. In the absence of your updates, her mind starts scripting stories. She replays past moments. She wonders if you've moved on. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Now her thoughts are full of you, not because you're chasing her, not because you're flooding her inbox or reacting to every post, but precisely because you've gone quiet. You've removed the noise. And now, in that silence, your presence has taken on a life of its own inside her mind. Think about this. When you are constantly available, when you are explaining yourself, proving yourself, over-communicating, she didn't have to imagine anything. You were predictable. But now, there's a question mark where your name used to be a full paragraph. And in that mystery, her imagination becomes loud enough to wonder, does he still think about me? Has he changed? Is someone else getting the version of him I took for granted? This is where Stoicism plays a quiet but powerful role. You're not playing games. You're not manipulating. You've simply detached your need for constant validation. Like a Stoic, you've chosen to master your emotions rather than be mastered by them. You've chosen restraint over reaction. And ironically, that discipline makes you echo louder than any message ever could. Her mind now does what you no longer need to. She replays your words, reanalyzes your silences, and fills in the blanks with what she hopes is still there. That's the beauty of self-control. You don't have to speak to be heard. Your silence speaks in her language now, through memory, through curiosity, through every unanswered question. So don't underestimate the power of holding back. When you stop showing up in obvious ways, you start showing up in deeper ones. And in her quietest moments, that voice she hears, it's not yours, but it's shaped by everything you once stood for. That's the Stoic advantage, presence without performance. Number 6. You create emotional gravity. You don't chase, yet she feels pulled toward you. That's because you've stopped orbiting her world. A grounded man, one who prioritizes inner peace, becomes the center of gravity, and suddenly she's the one trying to realign. What changed? You did. You stopped leaking energy into places that gave nothing back. You stopped explaining yourself, proving yourself, overextending just to be seen. And in doing so, something shifted. You became rooted still, but not stagnant, present, but not predictable. You see, emotional gravity isn't about force, it's about presence. And presence, real presence, comes from self-possession. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That mastery creates a kind of quiet pull. You're not trying to win her attention. You're focused on becoming the man who doesn't need it. And that's where the paradox begins. The less you try, the more she notices. The more you hold your frame, the more she feels drawn to it. It's not arrogance, it's stability. It's the kind of energy that doesn't demand anything, yet somehow invites everything. Imagine a man sitting calmly in the center of a storm. While everyone else reacts, scrambles, or spirals, he remains still. That stillness becomes a signal, a beacon, a point of emotional gravity. She might not understand why her thoughts drift back to you, why your silence feels louder than someone else's words, but that's the power of grounded energy. It doesn't chase, it attracts. It doesn't beg, it invites. You've become the gravity she never expected. Number 7. Actions that echo louder than words. By doing nothing, you're actually doing something powerful. You're showing strength, composure, self-respect. And she notices. Stoicism reminds us, let your character be your message. Let your restraint speak volumes. You see, a man who doesn't chase, who doesn't rush to explain, prove, or defend, is a man who understands the weight of his presence. When you step back instead of argue, when you walk away with grace instead of seeking validation, that silence leaves a deeper impression than 1,000 words ever could. It's the unshaken calm in you that makes her question the storm in herself. Think about it. When she expected a reaction and got peace instead, that stayed with her. When she thought you'd reach out, but you didn't, that wasn't indifference, it was discipline. That's the kind of action that lingers. It's not about cold detachment, it's about choosing stillness over chaos. Real actions aren't always loud. Sometimes it's the boundaries you hold, the silence you keep, the life you build without needing to broadcast every step. That's what echoes. That's what changes how she remembers you. Because in a world full of noise, a man who doesn't need to speak to be understood stands out. And that's the kind of presence no one forgets. So take a moment and reflect. Have you ever seen how your silence, your stillness, made more of an impact than any explanation ever could? That's not weakness, that's mastery. When you carry yourself with quiet strength, people feel it, even when you say nothing at all. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Drop a comment below and let me know how you've experienced this in your own life. Let's keep the conversation going. Number 8. You stop feeding the fire. When you stop reacting, the emotional drama dies out. And in that silence, she's left alone with her thoughts while you stay grounded. You're no longer playing the emotional game. And that's exactly what resets the balance. Think about it. Fire only grows when it's fed, when there's oxygen, fuel, and friction. But the moment you remove yourself as a source of reaction, the flames begin to shrink. Her provocations, her passive-aggressive comments, the subtle jabs meant to spark jealousy, they lose power when you don't take the bait. That's not weakness, that's strength under control. A Stoic man understands this deeply. You're not being cold, you're being clear. You're choosing not to get dragged into an emotional tug-of-war that only drains both of you. Instead, you remain composed. Maybe she expected a text storm after her silence. Maybe she thought you'd spiral, seek validation, or beg for clarity. But you didn't. You stayed still. You chose self-respect over emotional chaos. And that alone speaks volumes. Now, something interesting happens. Your detachment becomes her curiosity. Your peace becomes her confusion. Because the man who once fed the fire with his attention has now become the calm after the storm. And it forces her to sit in that quiet, to reflect, to feel the heat of her own actions without your reactions as a distraction. That's how you shift the dynamic, not by shouting louder, but by no longer giving the fire something to burn. You didn't change to get a reaction. You grew to protect your peace. And in doing so, you taught her the most powerful lesson. A man who no longer reacts is a man who has mastered himself. Number 9. Your calm disrupts her chaos. Where she once expected pursuit, she now finds peace, and it unsettles her. You see, she's used to a pattern. Say something dramatic, hint at distance, pull away, and the other person usually rushes in, reacts, tries to fix, to chase, to beg. But not you. You didn't flinch. You didn't engage with the storm. You stood still, unshaken. And that silence, that calm, it wasn't passive, it was powerful. Your calm becomes a mirror, reflecting her emotional turbulence. While she spins in indecision or plays out emotional games, your grounded presence highlights the contrast. She begins to notice how loud her world is and how peaceful yours is. That contrast doesn't just catch her attention. It creates discomfort, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your restraint is revealing. It exposes the noise she's been living in. A Stoic man doesn't compete with chaos. He doesn't argue with emotion or try to control outcomes. He simply aligns with his own values and remains composed. That's what you're doing. You're choosing strength through calm. And that subtle power disorients those who depend on emotional reactions to feel in control. Think about it. When someone throws a spark expecting a fire, and instead there's stillness, that moment becomes deeply unsettling. She might wonder, why isn't he chasing? Or, why does he seem so unaffected? But that's exactly when your calm starts to disrupt her patterns. You're no longer playing her emotional game. And that change, your refusal to dance in the chaos, forces her to reevaluate everything. So stay calm, stay grounded. You're not just protecting your peace, you're shifting the dynamic entirely. Number 10. You reclaim your frame. When you stop chasing, you reclaim the frame of the relationship. You're no longer on her terms. You operate by your values, your timing. A man who holds his ground, who acts with reason over impulse, becomes the one she can't stop thinking about. And let's be honest, most guys hand over the frame without even realizing it. They adjust their schedule to hers. They respond instantly, over-explain, over-promise, and slowly lose themselves in the process. But the moment you step back, take a breath, and remember who you are, that's when everything shifts. Reclaiming your frame doesn't mean being rigid or cold. It means living in alignment with your principles. It's what the Stoics called living according to nature, not being tossed around by emotions or external validation. You stop asking, what does she want? And start asking, what is true to me? That subtle shift creates gravity. She senses it when you're no longer seeking her reaction, but instead rooted in your own direction. Think about this. If she pulls away and you don't chase, if you stay calm, focused, and unbothered, what message does that send? It tells her that your world doesn't revolve around her attention. It tells her that you're the one with the frame now. And the paradox is, once you stop trying to win her approval, that's when she starts wondering how she lost your focus. You reclaim your frame not by talking louder, but by becoming still, by leading with clarity instead of confusion. So, if you're in a place where it feels like the dynamic is off, where you're giving more than you're receiving. Pause, recenter, reclaim your frame. That's when the game changes. And now, I want you to take a moment and reflect. Have you been living by your frame or reacting to hers? This isn't about blame or ego. It's about awareness. Because once you see the pattern, you can break it. When you operate from a place of calm certainty, rooted in your values, you stop chasing and start attracting. That's the Stoic path, not emotional detachment, but emotional discipline. So, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt the shift when you reclaimed your frame? Drop your thoughts in the comments or just leave this as your silent reminder. I hold the frame. Number 11. Letting her come to you isn't weak, it's wise. Doing nothing isn't giving up. It's trusting that what's meant for you will show up without force. As Seneca said, he who is brave is free. Free from chasing. Free from proving. And when she senses that freedom, she chases the source of it. Think about it. When you stop reaching out every time she pulls away, when you don't rush to explain yourself or fill every silence, you're not being passive. You're practicing presence with patience. You're showing that your world doesn't revolve around needing her response to validate your worth. And that's powerful, because a man who doesn't beg for attention, who doesn't need to be chosen to feel complete, stands out. He becomes the calm in a world of emotional noise. Stoicism teaches us to let go of what we can't control. And you can't control her thoughts, her pace, or her readiness. But you can control how you carry yourself. So when you stop chasing, you're not surrendering, you're anchoring yourself. You're letting her feel the absence of your energy. You're giving her the space to realize your value on her own without persuasion, without pressure. I've seen it happen too many times. Guys chase, overextend, and end up exhausted, wondering why the more they try, the more distant she becomes. But when a man pauses, when he holds the line and chooses stillness over seeking, that's when the dynamic begins to shift. That's when she starts to lean in. Letting her come to you doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing the most important thing, holding your frame. It means believing that your presence has value, even in silence. And when you move with that kind of quiet certainty, she feels it. She starts to notice the space you're not filling, the calm you're not disturbing, and slowly, she begins to gravitate toward it. So, no, this isn't weakness. This is wisdom. This is you stepping into the strength of restraint. This is Stoicism in motion, not coldness, but clarity. You're not waiting, you're observing. You're building. And you're giving her the rare experience of missing a man who doesn't chase, but who chooses himself first. So now you see, it was never about what you did to win her attention. It was about what you stopped doing when you no longer needed to prove, pursue, or persuade. You became the man she couldn't stop thinking about. Doing nothing doesn't mean being passive. It means being powerful in your presence, even in your absence. That's the essence of Stoic strength, restraint with reason, stillness with purpose. If this message hit home, drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts, or just type, "Stillness is power." Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and watch the recommended videos on screen to keep growing stronger. You've got more power than you think, especially in the moments you choose to do nothing.